All right, now let's have a look at this illusion. Well, it's not really an illusion. It just uses the visual properties of the retina to try to disguise a message, in this case a number, and we have to try to guess what that number is. And people who know what the number is say yes or no, and then you'll post it on to the next Facebook page, and then all your contacts try to guess what it is. So let's see if we can use a bit of visual science, visual neuroscience, to try to work out what this number is. So here we've got light numbers on a dark background. What we want to do is we can see if we can process that image to try to make the numbers a little bit clearer. So what I've done is inverted the image. So I've made what was black white, and the colors have also been inverted. So what was sort of a yellowish sort of color has now become purple. What was a purple sort of color has now become green, and so on. So in effect, we've got a bright background now and dark numbers, and I think to my eyes that makes it a little bit clearer. But depending on your screen resolution and your eyes, maybe you find the dark background makes it a little bit clearer. If you keep looking at that image, let's go back to the original image. If you keep looking at that image and staring at it and trying to work out what the numbers are, initially when you start looking at it, it looks a little bit clearer. But then as you keep looking at it, it looks less clear. So let's have a look at the retina and sort of try to understand how that works to see if we can work out a better way of having a look at that. Now, if we take a look at this cross-section of the retina, this is the eye here, and the retina sits at the back. And if we could see the cells that make up that retina, we could see something like this. So what we have are these cells right at the very back, and they're the photoreceptor cells. So they're the things that are actually receiving the light and sending signals to the rest of the brain. You've then got these bipolar cells, which transmit the signals from the photoreceptors through to other cells. And a bit closer to the opening of the eye, a bit closer to the pupil on the surface, you've got these ganglion cells. And as you can see here, each ganglion cell has a whole bunch of photoreceptors inputting onto that ganglion cell. And collectively, the amount of visual space that these photoreceptors gather is called the receptive field of this ganglion cell. And so that's what we're looking at. Now there's two different types of ganglion cells. There's cells which turn on when the center of their receptive field is illuminated, and they're called center-on ganglion cells. Then there's ganglion cells which fire more often when the amount of illumination decreases in the center of their receptive field, and they're called center-off ganglion cells. So when light shines in the center of the center-on ganglion cells, you get increased action potentials, as shown here. Alternatively, when darkness falls on the center of the center-off ganglion cells, then you also get increased firing, as shown here. So does that make sense? So there's a type of ganglion cell that fires more when there's more light, and there's a type of ganglion cell that fires more when there's less light. And so to make the most use of our visual system, we want to provide both sorts of stimuli. We want to activate both types of ganglion cells by flashing between when there's more light in the center of receptive fields and when there's less light in the center of the receptive fields. And that's going to turn on both types of ganglion cells. So if we go back to having a look at these images, your eyes are really good at picking up contrast. So that's effectively what these ganglion cells are doing. They're looking for the difference between light and dark, or in other words, between the edges of objects that are moving across your receptive field. And that's how you detect movement, and it's how you see writing, and it's how we're going to have a look at these numbers. So if we flick between a bright number on a dark background and a dark number on a bright background, then we're turning on our two receptive fields. So let's flash between those quickly. And so here you can start to see the numbers a little bit more clearly, but it's a little bit slow, I'm thinking. So there's quite a large amount of time between each flash. I mean, it's definitely better than the static images. So just to see if it helps, I'm just going to crank it up a little bit. So this is 1/50th of a second for every frame. And what we're doing is exactly the same thing. So we're just flashing between the bright and the dark. Again, I'm not going to say what number I see in the center, but I think this flashing helps. It activates the different ganglion cells and sort of helps see the contrast edges of that number, I think, a little bit better. And what we seem to have is the outline of a number with a dark center. To me, the first three numbers look quite clear, and it's this last number that's a little bit ambiguous. Let's try making that picture a little bit bigger. So that's the image a little bit bigger. I've made it 2 times the size now. Again, I'm not going to say what I think it is. I don't want to influence what anyone else thinks the number is, but I think that makes it a little bit clearer maybe. All right, now there's another trick that we can do to try to make use of the visual system. So when you're looking at something directly, the image shines onto your fovea. It's a particular part in the center of the eye that has a very high density of photoreceptors. But there's the rest of the eye as well, and you're very good at detecting movement because of contrast edges moving across the receptive fields of the other parts of your retina. So if we can move a visual stimulus across the retina, then not only are you activating off-center and on-center ganglion cells, but you're also activating a sequence of these 2 different types of ganglion cells across the retina. And so you've got a series of circuits turning on and switching off in order to try to detect this movement and tell you information about its direction of travel and things like that. All right, so let's try to use the rest of those ganglion cells by moving this picture. And so that way the picture's now moving across your retina, or the image of the picture is moving across your retina and activating a whole bunch of ganglion cells, not just at the fovea, but across the other parts of the retina as well. So the picture's moving around. Try not to look directly at the number you're trying to see and let it move across your visual field. Look around, try to make out what that image is. I think this moving image is a little bit clearer than the still version of the image. Even with the still version of the image, the reason why you can see it is because your eyes are moving around, so the image is still moving around your retina, but now I'm moving the image as well, and see what you think. Again, I'm not going to say what I think the number is, but I think this makes it a little bit clearer so that everyone else can have a better guess at what this number should be.